So, one thing that I want to do before letting you guys see this video is, as you guys know, I have green eyes. It's clear to see. During the filming of this video, at some point around the time that I start talking about possession, my eyes turn to a hazel brown color and stay that way for the duration of the video. So, without further ado, hopefully you guys enjoy the second part of this saga. It was interesting to film because we had some technical difficulties and a lot of other weird things happened, but find out for yourself and you be the judge. Hi guys, welcome back to The Divine Witch. I'm your host, The Divine Witch, and as you can tell, we're actually doing this properly instead of just from my phone camera. You're going to hear my dogs in the background. You might see some kids pass by. You might see some stuff from home renovations that is like over here. Just kind of ignore that. So let's go on. So this is the second time I'm attempting to record this because the first time, as soon as I mentioned this book, the Zoom went goodbye. And so that's just adds to the saga of trying to read this book by Michael W. Ford. So the first video, I was telling you guys some of the experiences that I had experienced, along with how far I had actually gotten into the book. This is to explain to you what has happened so far, what's going on with me reading this book. I'm going to start out, and I know I said this in the previous video, but I've never had a book that I'm reading that one caused like almost a full takeover, and two, I have had the weirdest shit happen while reading a book, between dreams, sightings, voices, and technical issues. Now it's very odd. So if this is something that normally happens when other people try to read any book that is by Michael W. Ford, you have my attention and my fucking respect. I'm putting that out there now because literally I have read the Hecate. I've read other books like Keeping Her Keys by Hecate. Could you imagine? Hecate is just like, here's my book. Anyway, that's beside the point. I guess you could see it as Hecate is communicating, but you get what I see. Oh my God. Fuck my life. Just fuck it, okay? At this point, fuck it. I'm not redoing a video because I don't know what'll happen technologically, and I'm only human, and you get to see it, and you get to enjoy it and laugh like my husband just did and make fun of me with it because at this point, fuck it. Anyway, welcome to The Divine Witch, where squirrels try to read books. Anyway, so I am currently on page 150, progress. Which where I stopped at was talking about the Underworld ferryman. Now, that is a big jump since the last time we saw each other. What happened? Did I get to read finally? Yes. So here's the weird thing, okay? And I didn't realize it until my husband started talking to me about it. He was like, you know what's weird? He was like, for anybody who's not an adult who thinks about things like this in an ew sense, because there's part of a teenage me going, ew, we're about to talk about this. But I started my blood moon. If you don't know what that is, the flow of the ant. You know what I mean? The crimson wave. Anyway, figure it out. Look up the references. You may find some other weird stuff, but I'm talking about my period. Anyway, so I'm reading it and he's like, how's it been going? He's like, because I know you were struggling. I was like, I got really far. He's like, that's weird. I was like, why? He was like, it's weird that you were struggling to read it before your period. Then you start having your period, which blood is life. And then, bam, you have no issues as far as that goes. I'm like, by George, you have something there. Am I saying that you have to be on your period or bleeding to read this book? Obviously not. But did it help? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it's just a weird winky dink. Maybe it was just one of those things of like, I'm losing my mind. Anything's possible on this channel, realistically. But I will say there was still that when I talk about possession in a sense of things taking over, from the previous video to this video, It's almost like someone viewing your through your eyes. Okay. So like, I don't know, and I'll have to find out. If it did work, cool. If not, then I'm gonna have to redo this whole video and fuck it anyway. Okay. So like, here I am trying to describe possession from my standpoint. And once again, my camera's like, fuck you. And then shuts down, reopens. So if this is all included and what I said previously works, that's great. If not, you'll never see this. So technical issues, big thing that's happening. Anyway, with that being said, with this book, every time I show this book, something happens. Ugh. Anyway, what was I saying? I'm like, oh my God, this is what insanity is like, right? It has to be, because it's like, I'm a squirrel anyway. If you don't know me and you've never seen any of my videos, and this is the first video you've seen, you're probably thinking, what the fuck is wrong with this woman? But I promise you, I do have attention and I can't stay on task. But I'm like a squirrel. When things happen, I must acknowledge them within the moment. If I do not, then, well, this is what you get. And I try to not acknowledge it. I am acknowledging it in all of its forms of fuckery. So, like I was saying, when it comes to possession, so for me, it's like someone seeing through my eyes and pushing themselves forward, and I'm taking a back seat. That's what I talk about when I'm talking about possession. Now, here's the funny thing, okay? So I dealt with everything that you've seen in the first video. The next day, that's when the blood moon came. Then I start reading. Literally no more than just maybe 3 or 4 pages. It literally talks about possession in a form of sense of like when you're in tune and you feel like the goddess is taking over, and it's almost like someone's looking through your eyes. And I'm like, that's fucked up. It's like almost as if the book's like, we want you to experience this fuckery before you read about it. So that's a whole thing. Okay. Now, with that being said, we're going to move on between everything from the last video to this video, right? So I have, like I said, made it quite a bit, but I did have some interesting things happen while reading this book. Again, it may not have been the slightest of possession or getting rid of that, like feeling like someone's looking but not fully taking over. But as you know, I have 2 girls and they're both teenagers. One of them is about to be 15 this year, and that's the one that I have been butting heads with, so to speak, because she doesn't want to do her homework and I'm trying to get her to do her homework, to the point to where like we're doing homework, okay, because education is a must. You know, you're going to need to know things when you get out into the real world. You're going to need a high school diploma for if you want to get a job, or if you want to go to college, or if you just want to take some kind of course to learn anything. The basics is normally high school diploma. So we've been kind of going through that. Pretty sure a lot of families go through that, like I have. And so on this particular night, we are going to have a conversation. And by we having a conversation, me talking and her just giving me the teenage stare of doom, which like I like to call a cycle of silence of like, yeah, I hear you. And you get those one-worded answers. And then you're just sitting there in a room of silence. Well, I decided to take that room of silence and make it productive. So I started reading this book, right? And as I'm reading the book, you know, when you're dealing with things like that of that nature, you think about it. No matter how much you're trying to redirect your focus, you think about it. So my mind's thinking about it on one way, and I'm reading what I'm reading, and I'm taking that in as I'm thinking about life stuff, right? And all of a sudden something weird happens, and I'm like, either one, I'm tired, 2, stressed, or I'm losing my mind. Which at this point I'm thinking I'm losing my mind, but my husband's literally seeing this happen in real time, so I'm like, okay, it's not me. He wasn't there at this point, but I'll go on. So as I'm reading this page in the book, which the funny thing later that dawned on me is that it was invoking a certain aspect of Hecate. to where you handle issues that need to come to a close and to find a resolution so that way you can move forward, right? And all of a sudden, I'm just going to pick a random spot in the book. I'm not going to tell you what spot, like I'm not even going to try to make it. So let's just say randomly page 88, right? So here I am reading, right? So I'm like midway and I'm thinking, and all of a sudden over here, I see words appear like this. Now, when I say words appear, it almost looked like someone took a quill pen and ink and wrote me out a sentence. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's my vision because like, you know how like you're reading something and sometimes it'll shift. It's not a good thing and it's not a good sign, but sometimes it does happen if you're in thought and you're reading. The weird thing is that one, the style of writing was in cursive and not in font print. The second thing that was weird is that the direction in which it was going. The third thing that was weird about it was it happened more than once. It happened once when I was in, like I said, the cycle of silence with a teenager, to the point to where I read part of it and then it disappeared. And I'm like, yep, time to put down the book and handle what I got to handle because my brain's just messing with me. So I end up talking with her. We have a good conversation. I think we're on the same page. We move on. She goes to her room. I stay in my room and I continue reading because at that point I've resolved my issue and I'll be okay. So as I'm reading, I get maybe a couple pages ahead. Happens again. Same thing. Going upward in a slope, like someone wrote me a note. And at this point, I pretty much got what I needed to know. Okay. But also, it was weird. And this is why it was weird. One, I've never had that happen, no matter what book I've read, no matter if it is about religion or sci-fi fantasy or whatever. I've never had where it just seems like words appear in a book, no matter what book it is. Like literally, I've got the Hecate and it's like a $600 book because of the edition that it was. Thank you, Cookie of Doom. But I've never had that happen, not even with one that's supposed to be what it is. You know what I mean? And here I am reading a book by someone that, once again, Cookie of Doom suggested. And so far, I've seen shadow figures. I've heard different voices saying different things. Now, when I say voices, it's not like I'm hearing them all the time. You know what I mean? It's just like, you know how like when you're in a house alone and you hear that random voice of somebody say something, but you don't hear exactly what they're saying, but you catch a part of it and you hear it so clearly. Some would say it's an auditory hallucination. Brain work. Hallucination. That's what I'm calling it. You're probably going to correct me. I don't care at this point. But for me, this is something that happens normally when I have a spirit in the room, because it's happened before. Because I do a lot of spirit work, a lot of spirit communication, and sometimes, you know, the house spirits, they speak. So with that being said, that's another thing that I've experienced. Had odd dreams that I don't really understand, but I'm trying to, which I explained some of that in the last video. And now I'm having technical difficulties with equipment when speaking about this book. Now, I did a little bit of research, and this book is freshly new. I think it literally just came out this month. And as far as the contents in the book, it's like you get a snippet for beginners, but it's more for your, I would classify it more as an advancement from the beginner stage. And then there's some parts that push it a little bit more further when it comes into the context of like, how's the book? You know, what kind of material does it cover? Now, as far as material, it is separated, which I'm going to double check myself before I do say this. So apparently there is altogether by the author's definition in the publication. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let me make sure that's it. 4 chapters. But I'm going to show you what I mean. So give me a second so you guys can see what I'm saying. I'm going to go with the second one. So if you look the way that it's set up, let's see if I can get this up here. So like, let's say this is chapter 2, right? Chapter 2 starts at 81. You go all through here, all down this list right here. Then you go back here and you go all the way down here. Now, the way that it's sectioned is it's not overbearing. So the way, even though it's separated into 4 different sections, which I love because that's another form of the crossroads, you get 4 different sections, 4 different ways instead of the major 3 that we normally think about when it comes to Hecate. But the way that it's like formatted is you get a few pages here of this topic. Then you go into the next topic, it's a few pages. So it's not like you're reading a whole paragraph just on one thing. So you're being able to get more information into one, and it's the information that you need to know. Plus you get the author's opinion, and there's certain terminology that deals with the Luciferian or the left-handed path, which, you know, I've never been one to be in the Luciferian path, but I do like some of the teachings that it does teach, such as, you know, being so not into yourself, but being aware of yourself, that even though if you do decide to worship a god, which from what I get from the author's perspective is it's more of a partnership than a worshiping or a devotion. But for me, working with Hecate is a devotion. Now, I may misinterpret what the author actually feels because I don't know them. I just know what I'm reading and what I'm kind of getting from it. But for me personally, I follow it as I'm dedicated to Hecate. I am offered to Hecate. I am her vessel. I work for her. But in a Luciferian path, you are your own god, which I also do believe as well, because we create our reality. We have the ability to manipulate situations. We have the ability to add people into our situations or to take them away. And that's a very godlike aspect that we have as individuals. So I do like that part of the Luciferian tradition. Now, as far as I could tell you, there is different beautiful illustrations from a variety of different people. So it's not just one person. Also, there is different prayers. There is different hymns, different sections from not only the author's perspective, but from, you know, you got different, let me see. I'm trying to find one to show you guys what I'm talking about. 1 second. I probably should have been. And then, you know, it also talks about the formula of will, desire, and belief, which, you know, no matter what magical practice you have, you know, those are key components as well. Here's part of the illustrations that I was talking to you guys about when it comes to this book. Now, this isn't a complete review, but it is a review of what I've read so far. Give me a second. There's different summonings that you can do. There's a section in with about Hades, which I really love, because you don't find a whole lot about Hades. And the way that he has done it in here is you get Hades, but you also get the Pluto, and then you get other aspects as well. So, okay, so adapted from the Orphic hymn 18 to Pluton. And then it gives you all the information. So that's kind of like what I'm talking about. You're not only getting it from the author's perspective, you're also getting historical things as well, which I do like, especially, you know, when we're talking about the underworld and we're talking about the aspects of the underworld. Now, there's sections where they talk about the shades. They talk about different demons. They talk about different aspects, different deities and gods within the underworld, but it is mostly focused on Hecate. But I do like the fact that they've incorporated that because it all works together. There is some things that I also did learn from this book so far, and some things that kind of just validated things that I've seen. as far as Tartarus, the different aspects of how to go to the underworld. There's a whole section on that, like how can a human travel to the underworld using magic. There's a section of like where you might get snippets through dreams and different things like that, but are you truly within Hades? And the whole aspect of to be in Hades, you must die. But how can the black magician switch it about? You know what I mean? Magician. Those two I always can puzzle, but so far it's good. So far that's what I'm experiencing. So far it has definitely been a journey of discovery, but also a journey of what the fuck. And I don't normally do real in-depth book reviews because most of the books that I've seen on Hecate or the subject of Hecate is either here's a lot of how I believe and I'm going to persuade you to do what I want. With this book, you get the, okay, here's how I believe. Here's the history. Here's some other context that kind of correlates. What do you want to do with it? How does that make you feel? What is your thought process? So I do like that in the aspect of the writing. I do like the aspect that they acknowledge that there's not only dark aspects of Hecate, but there's light as well, and this kind of in between. There was one section that I really did kind of vibe with because, I kind of try to stay in between. Like I vibrate between using the dark aspects and using the light aspects and finding the balance. Where it was talking about your own demons. So you have your demon that's, your lighter aspects of yourself, and your demon that's the darker aspects of yourself. And then you have yourself. And I almost thought of it like an upside down triangle in a way, because you are the focus point of which these two demons coexist. And it is up to you to be kind of like a teeter-totter effect, right? Or which my fingers ain't. Well, let's just say this is it, right? So imagine this is like the triangle right here. And this direct line connects you, okay? So imagine that triangle, that invisible triangle. Where am I at? I got to do it for the camera. So like trying to figure out which way with the camera. There we go. Yeah, right about that. So you have to keep it balanced. And if you go one way or the other, then it affects parts of yourself. If you go one way or the other, so it's trying to find that balance. So that way you don't deal with madness. You don't deal with something overcoming your life to where you can't get out of it, which is something that they do talk about, which I think is the aspect of chaos magic in itself, or any kind of darker magic that you're doing. There's going to be times where you feel like you've lost your mind. And it says it in this book, even like there's times where you're going to feel like you lost your mind. There are going to be things that happen to you that you're not going to be able to tell other people, which realistically, if I didn't have this channel, I would probably tell my coven, and that would be about it, about the experiences that I've had with this book. But since I did get the book, and I do have this channel, and I do like to share those weird little happenings, and I get a lot of people daily. What books would you recommend with Hecate? What book would you recommend with Hecate? If you are looking to advance from a beginner and move upward, or if you're wanting to learn in depth of different aspects that may be the darker side of Hecate, I would suggest this book. Just for the reason being, so far, that I like what I'm seeing. I like what is being presented. I like how the author themselves presents the information in it. I like the fact that they cover a lot of subjects in one, instead of trying to make it so complex that you have to buy every book the author gets Like you could literally just buy this book, and throughout the book they do suggest certain books that they've written and how it all kind of correlates. But realistically, you could get this book, learn what you want from this book, go to another author, get their information, which would be more of an eclectic style than a Luciferian, but you would be creating your own reality. That's what magic is. And spirituality, paganism, whatever you want to call it. You're making your own system. So it's a really good book. Like I always tell people, always, have different resources of information and, the things that you get as well, as far as like what you believe, what your moral compass is, what is values to you, which is another thing the author talks about, which is lacking in a lot of books. The difference between societal norms and what you consider good versus evil. And I brought this up many times, and people get bewildered or lost when it comes to this concept of, well, good and evil is clearly defined. But how I like to explain it is, well, if it's clearly defined, then why do you have so many people doing so many different things that maybe us as a society has defined as not right, but that person did not fit that code that society has made? And then you get into the whole debate of, people and their mental state and blah, 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 blah. But you got to think of it as this. Societal norms change over time. Like, for instance, here in America, slavery was seen as, well, that's just what you do. It is what it is. And then over time, that became abolished. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's the same concept. Societal norms change. So do you and your experiences within those societal norms. Like, for instance, you may come from a family of Christians. From as far back as they've always been Christians. But for you, you're a pagan, or you're a witch, or you're a shaman, or you're a Luciferian. See what I mean? Like, that's the difference. It's not only about making decisions, it's making decisions based on your moral compass, your principles, and what you feel is right. And on that note, I think that's a good way to lead off when it comes to this book and talking about it. Eventually, at the end, I will have, I think for the last piece, unless something truly crazy happens in between, the last piece of this review saga will be me actually going through the whole book, talking about the different sections as much as I can. Some may get skipped over, depending on the relevance that I think that it is. I will tell you the information that is in it, as far as like the chapters, line out as well. Going for example. So like if we look at the book and, for chapter 2, the first thing that we're going to talk about is initiation and imagination. So that tells you what it's going to be about, but it doesn't tell you what's in the book. Because I want you guys to go out and read this book, because I'm enjoying it when I can focus. And I think that it's one of those books that anybody who follows Hecate should have eventually at some point in time, no matter if that's the path they follow or not. Because when we look at the goddess and we look how the goddess is worshipped, we don't look at the goddess from, just ancient time. We look at it in a current time text. And we also look at where it could go into the future as well. And it's an interesting concept when it comes with Hecate, because she's been around for so long, and there's so much to do with information on Hecate and her path, and the differences in how she was worshipped compared to now. Because guess what? Societal norms changed. Mindsets changed. So what you did back then, it's not always what you can do now. So with that being said, this is part 2 of the saga. And stay tuned because eventually there will be a conclusion, and then we'll finally go over the book and give it a proper review. So thank you guys for joining me. And until next time, remember, no two witches, witch alike.